Chapter 90, Faster, Harder, Stronger. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The thin hand carried Tian Haixing Shui's body off his horse and moved towards the end of 100 Blossom Street. Tian Haixing Shui's body moved as fast as an arrow as it cut through the rain. A clear mark was seen on the marble floor as the hand and Tian Haixing Shui traveled several dozens of yards away. The hand belonged to a tall and thin elder. His attire was casual and his shoulders were high. He looked ancient, but there was a trace of a warlike scent. Under his thin hands, Tian Haixing Shui looked like a child. The blank spots in the curtain of rain rushed forward and finally stopped in front of the battle horse. A person appeared, and it wasn't until he appeared did the rain from the sky finally start dropping again. The previously broken rain curtains connected and became dense again. Just from these scenes, you could already tell how fast this person was. He was just a very normal middle-aged man. His shirt was filled with pictures of gold coins and he wore several gold rings on his fingers. Golden light was flashing from his body and he seemed to be a regular rich man often seen in villages or the countryside. Just from his appearance, no one could guess that the punch came from him. He appeared suddenly in the morning rain and sent dozens of knights flying. His single punch easily broke through Tian Haixing Shui's iron spear and made a thin and tall elder come out as well. The officer Jean of the Herb Garden. His true identity was revealed just last night at Wei Yang Palace. He was Jin Yulu. The thin and tall elder looked at Jin Yulu. His white eyebrow raised slightly while raindrops started to sink into his hair. The atmosphere was heavy. He opened his lips to speak. Jin Yulu's appearance made Tang 36 realize that there would be no trouble for the Tradition Academy today. He was in extreme joy, but as he saw the tall elder about to speak, Tang 36 yelled, "Talk after we fight." This sentence was targeted towards Jin Yulu. Normally, at Tang 36's age and generation, it would be disrespectful for him to yell at such a legendary figure, but Jin Yulu didn't mind. He just replied, "True." Right after he finished his sentence, Jin Yulu disappeared once again into the morning rain. The pond on the marble floor splattered and footmarks appeared on the wall of 100 Blossom Street. Several dozens of blank spots broke through the intense rain curtain. In a flash, he was dozens of yards away. People who were watching this scene couldn't believe their eyes. How could a person in this world be this fast? The thin tall elder squinted his eyes slightly and his expression turned heavy. As an elder who participated in the previous war, he obviously knew how powerful Jin Yulu was, especially in the aspect of speed. The elder therefore used his ultimate technique without hesitation. He raised his thin hands and pushed forward. A cold but powerful aura mounted 100 Blossom Street immediately and the rain started falling slower from the sky. In the duration of their landing, frost appeared on the surface of the raindrops. When they fell onto the marble floor, they flashed and scattered like pearls. The rain curtain transformed into an ice curtain. This curtain was formed to defend against Jin Yulu's attack, but even so, multiple frozen spheres were crushed and thrown into street walls by Jin Yulu. Just as the shadow appeared, Jin Yulu's hands were already raised. He stared at the elder who was sealed behind the ice curtain and squinted his eyes slightly. The pupil of his eyes lost focus and dark light seemed to emit from its terrifying coldness. Countless friction sounds were heard on 100 Blossom Street. Thousands of flashes appeared and vanished on the street. Those flashes were slightly curved and extremely sharp. If someone looked closely, they would notice that the flashes appeared to be claw marks of some kind of beast. The tall, thin elder used his powerful and dense chi to set up a durable defense wall and froze the rain curtain into ice. Surely it effectively slowed down Jin Yulu's terrifying speed, but it couldn't hinder Jin Yulu's attack patterns. No matter how tough his defense was, he couldn't stop a string of rapid blows. In just the brief moment of few water drops landing on the ground, Jin Yulu launched several hundreds of blows into the rain curtain. Of course Tang 36, Chen Chongsheng and the knights in the pond couldn't see these scenes. These two were truly powerful Xiaxianists. A tearing sound was heard and the dense rain curtain was pierced through. Jin Yulu passed the defensive line and arrived in front of the thin tall elder. He swinged his arm and the elder yelled while blocking Jin Yulu's fist forcefully with his thin palms. Shock waves splashed the raindrops everywhere and cracks started to appear on the walls of the streets. Although Tian Hai Xing Shui was protected behind the tall, thin elder and he wasn't harmed by the direct impact of the shock wave, he still felt the damage and let out a deep moan as his face turned even paler. On the other hand, the tall, thin elder felt the immediate impact. The enormous strength of Jin Yulu's fist was endured entirely by him. His face grew pale as blood started flowing out of the corner of his lips. The elder's legs shook slightly. Jin Yulu looked at him expressionlessly but he stopped attacking. He placed his hands back into his pockets, turned around and walked in the direction of Tradition Academy. His walking posture didn't present himself as a rich man anymore, but rather more of a farmer. The battle between the powerful figures happened quickly and ended quickly. It was faster than any observer imagined because Jin Yulu was very hasty. His speed was out of this world. It was even faster than flying birds that were famous for their immense speed. Even in the entire continent, his speed could be ranked at the top. What is a farmer like you doing here and not harvesting crops in the eastern fields? The tall, thin elder looked at Jin Yulu's slightly curved back and yelled angrily. After they fought, they could talk especially since they knew each other from a long time ago. Jin Yulu didn't turn back. He continued walking with his hands in the pockets. Fei Dian, what are you doing here and not sweeping snow in the north? Hearing the name, Fei Dian, Tang 36's expression changed slightly and some noise was heard in the depth of the street. That tall, thin elder was Fei Dian. Fei Dian was the one of the oldest and most powerful generals of Zhou dynasty. He participated in the previous war against the demon race, and his contribution and recognition was huge. Even the most famous general right now, Xue Xingchuan, would bow in respect when encountering him. Who knew such a powerful figure would appear outside of Tradition Academy in the morning and help Tian Hai Xing Shui? But no one expected that such a powerful figure would lose to that middle-aged man. All citizens of Zhou dynasty knew that Fei Dian learned and practiced the way of Cold Hawk. He was recognized for his swift and deadly speed. But that middle-aged man was even faster and more powerful than him. The people who didn't know the identity of the middle-aged man were shocked. They wondered, who is this man? But Chen Changsheng and his crew obviously knew. Even after all these years, you, Jin Yulu, still rely on your strength and speed. Fei Dian looked at his back and mocked. Only after hearing this, the people in the street knew who Jin Yulu was. They were shocked without words. After last night's Ivy Festival, many people knew that Jin Yulu followed Princess Luo Luo and settled in the capital. The Yao general that even Emperor Tai Zong admired became a living legend so many years after the war. If he's the middle-aged man, then the outcome of this battle was determined before the fight even started. No matter how fast Fei Dian was, he couldn't be swifter than him. Jin Yulu's speed could rank amongst the top 5 in the entire continent. Hearing Fei Dian's swords, Jin Yulu still didn't turn around. 700 years ago, you said the same words. 700 years later, you haven't changed a bit. You specializes in strength and speed, but you are worse than me in both fields. What can I do about it? Truly talented young members of great background were protected by powerful people to ensure their growth of becoming real Xiaxianists. For example, when Tang 36 came to the capital from Wenshui, the principals of Heavenly Academy cared for him, which is why no one from his family followed. But it was clear that his family didn't expect him to leave Heavenly Academy after such a short period of time. For 300 years Fei Dian and Tian Hai family had a good relationship. He was responsible of guarding the northern border, so the Tian Hai family sent Tian Hai Xing Shui to the northern border so that he could learn and mature. Obviously Fei Dian became the protector of Tian Hai Xing Shui in the northern border. Even after they returned to the capital, the relationship stayed the same. This morning when Tian Haisheng Shui came to Tradition Academy to punish Chen Changsheng and his crew, Fei Dian didn't say anything. He just followed behind with stealth because he knew something was off. As he expected, the 3 students of Tradition Academy were extraordinary, and at the end, even Jin Yulu appeared. If I remember correctly, you should be in Academy of Li Palace right now. Fei Dian accepted the handkerchief that Tian Haisheng Shui handed over and lightly wiped off the blood in the corner of his lips. At the same time, Jin Yulu reached the entrance of Tradition Academy. He took the handkerchief that Chen Changsheng handed over and wiped the rainwater off his face lightly. He turned, glanced at Fei Dian and said, "Why do I have to be in Academy of Li Palace? Princess Luo Luo is currently living in Academy of Li Palace. This was requested by the Pope and the Queen." Fei Dian squinted across the dense rain curtain and said. Jin Yulu laughed a little and asked, "And what does it have to do with me?" Fei Dian wrinkled his eyebrows lightly. "You should understand, Emperor Bai let the Queen take care of your princess, therefore the words of the Queen is the same as the commands of Emperor Bai. That's why even Princess Luo Luo needs to listen to her. You, as an official, dare to disobey the command of Emperor Bai. The commands of Emperor Bai that I stopped obeying them several hundred years ago. If I remember correctly, you were also present at that moment. Have you forgotten?" Jin Yulu's smile vanished as he said expressionlessly, "Starting from the day my emperor announced that command, I was no longer an official of him. I'm not under the control of his orders anymore. My princess listened to the divine queen's words because she's the elder and Emperor Bai agreed to it. I don't have to listen to the divine queen's words because I'm not a Zhou citizen, and the queen isn't my elder. Plus, Emperor Bai can't command me anymore. I'm an officer of my princess. I only listen to her words. My princess told me to look after Tradition Academy, so I came to look after them. Is there a problem?" Fei Dian looked at him and his mood was complicated. He knew which command of Emperor Bai Jin Yulu was talking about. It was the one which members of Mountain Li delivered the military supplies late, and that they should be prosecuted. At that time, this event was known throughout the entire army and it split the force into 2 sides. It nearly destroyed the alliance between humans and Yao race. Fei Dian sighed, "After several hundred years, your personality is still so stubborn. Your tone is still so forceful." Jin Yulu said expressionlessly, "At that time, I was responsible for carrying out military punishment, I killed countless people. I didn't listen to Emperor Bai's words, Emperor Tai Zong couldn't handle me either. Why is this? Because I'm right. If I'm right, then why should I not be stubborn? Why should I not be forceful?" Silence filled the 100 Blossom Street. The only sound that could be heard was the noise of raindrops landing on the marble floor. Of the dozens of people in front of the entrance of Tradition Academy and the hidden crowd in the depths of 100 Blossom Street, no one spoke out. Chapter 91, The Entrance of Academy and Heart of People. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jin Yuli dressed like a rich man and had long sleeves covering both hands like an old farmer. Nothing on him looked out of the ordinary until he spoke these words. After hearing these words, everyone felt different. Chen Changsheng had the strongest feeling, especially the last sentence, "I didn't do anything wrong, so why can't I be tough, and why can't I be daring?" When he had just arrived in the capital, in Dong Yu General's mansion and outside of the priest's academy, he had said similar words. Because of the reactions from the others, he had been worrying. Am I really too different, or put another way, is what I insist really because of stubbornness or bitterness as how others see it, or is it just a really strange thing? Upon hearing Jin Yulu's words, he realized there were actually many people just like him. This made him happy. Has Elder been protecting the Tradition Academy? Tian Haisheng Shui walked out, staring at Jin Yulu coldly. Jin Yulu said calmly, "Why not?" Tian Haisheng Shui said, "As the official of the Red River, don't you need to take care of Princess? Don't you need to be concerned about the princess's safety? Jin Yulu squinted and said, Yuzhou people said the Li Palace is the safest place, so I let Princess move out from the herb garden. So obviously Yuzhou people need to be responsible for Princess's safety. What do I need to worry about? Tian Hai family wanted to destroy the Tradition Academy. Their first course of action was to get an excuse to move Luo Luo out of the Tradition Academy. Now Jin Yulu was actually using this reason to not stay at Li Palace and to instead stay at the Tradition Academy. Tian Hai Xing Shui couldn't argue against it. Suddenly, several wagons appeared on 100 Blossom Street. Tian Hai Xing Shui took his subordinates to the Tradition Academy. He chose to do it early in the morning because he knew clearly that there were some people in the capital trying to protect the Tradition Academy. On this rainy morning, he wanted to destroy the Tradition Academy swiftly before anyone realized. However, he didn't expect the three youngsters in the Tradition Academy to respond in such a tough way, and he didn't expect the appearance of Jin Yulu. As the time passed, the people who were secretly observing this fight went to report the situation back to each of their masters. The masters rushed here. Several wagons arrived in the rain urgently. When Prince Chenlu got out from the wagon in the front, he had even buttoned his clothes improperly. It could be imagined how hurried he was. A thin middle-aged man held the umbrella to shield him from the rain as they walked to the entry of the Tradition Academy. Just by seeing the current circumstance, he already knew what had happened. He looked at Tian Hai Xing Shui, frowned and said, "Go back." If only talking about position in family hierarchy, Prince Chenlu and Tian Hai Xing Shui were in the same generation. As a matter of fact, Tian Hai Xing Shui was older than him. However, Prince Chenlu was part of the Qin royal family. Most importantly, the Divine Queen was closer to him than her nephews in the Tian Hai family, so he didn't speak to Tian Hai Xing Shui in a friendly way. Tian Hai Xing Shui took a glimpse at him coldly. His look was unspeakably reluctant, yet he didn't say anything to object. To this member of the Qin royal family who lived in the royal palace for a long time, the youngsters of the Tian Hai family were envious and jealous. Several years ago, there were people trying to kill him, but the Divine Queen got very angry, and since then, no one dared to disrespect him anymore, at least on the surface. The person who got out of the second wagon was Officer Xian. Yesterday the entire capital knew that the Pope had called Princess Luo Luo to the Li Palace Academy to study. The Tradition Academy was shaking in the wind and rain, so his heart was also shaking. He couldn't feel safe thinking, before when I saw that recommendation letter, I offered many helps to Qin Chongsheng in the Tradition Academy, am I wrong? So today in the morning, after knowing what happened to the Tradition Academy, he didn't arrive at the first time, but went to Bishop's house, because he worried that he misunderstood the Pope's meaning again. Bishop was smiling, without saying a word, which made him feel even more scared. Was the bishop's thinking different from the Pope? Was the bishop actually going to reverse a verdict for that thing? Was he actually going to stand in the opposite side of the Pope? Was the tradition actually going to split? Officer Xian was very scared, but he realized he had no way to go back because the entire capital and the entire Li Palace all knew why the Tradition Academy had obtained the opportunity to revitalize, and being invited to participate in the Ivy Festival was all his doing. Who would believe that he was only an executor? Now he could only stand by the Tradition Academy, so must stand by the Tradition Academy. Such fear of being forced to take a stand usually would make one very brave, because he had already put all his eggs in one basket. With no way to step back, Officer Xian actually appeared even tougher than Prince Chenlu. He paid no attention to Tian Hai Xing Shui's reputation at all and criticized him harshly. Tian Hai Xing Shui's face turned more and more pale as he became more and more angry. When Prince Chenlu and the people of the Department of the Traditional Education all arrived, he lost his chance to destroy the Tradition Academy. Jin Yulu stood in front of the Tradition Academy's gate. Most importantly, the three students of the Tradition Academy did surprisingly well. Tian Hai Xing Shui looked at the three people, lifted up his eyebrows slightly, took over the rope his soldier delivered and shouted, "Go! Go!" The same word at different pitches represented completely different meanings. Tang 36 held his sword, looked at him and asked, "You want to leave just like that?" In the battle this morning, the students of the Tradition Academy wounded 4 Tian Hai Xing Shui's soldiers, and Jin Yulu wounded many and even hurt Fei Dian. With this, Tian Hai Xing Shui himself felt a little scared. On the other hand, the people of the Tradition Academy were not harmed at all. No matter what way you saw it, it's the Tradition Academy that gained advantages. But Tang 36 still didn't want to just let them go. Prince Chen Lu frowned slightly. Glancing at this playboy of the Wen Shui Tang family and remembering that the night in the Wei Yang Palace, he disliked how this kid acted impolitely and disregarded the general situation of the continent completely. We need an explanation. The fall rain gradually stopped. Chen Changsheng walked up 2 steps, pointed at the ruined gate behind him and said, "Why would Tian Hai Xing Shui come to break the Tradition Academy's gate and even plan to completely destroy the Tradition Academy?" Because he wanted to avenge for his cousin Tian Hai Ye. Although he was not so close to Tian Hai Ye, he was still family, his own family. Tian Hai Ye was crippled by the Tradition Academy. But that was the fight on the Ivy Festival, a fair fight. If he lost, then he lost. Why could he avenge here? Moreover, even if he wanted to vengeance, he should go fight Luo Luo. Instead, he expressed his anger on the Tradition Academy, and this reason was not enough for the students. There was another intention that was hidden deeply, which was to solve some trouble for the Divine Queen. However, this reason definitely couldn't be announced publicly. Also, the last reason couldn't be mentioned either. Chen Changsheng knew the opponent couldn't say his reason, so he asked him for an explanation. Tian Hai Xing Shui's face turned gloomy. Fei Dian sighed, looked at the rain that was getting weaker and weak, pointed at the water that was building up on the street and said, "It's raining so the road is slippery. The carriage is destroyed and people died. How about this explanation? The carriage that broke the Tradition Academy had the best compartment and the best war horse. Even if in a snow barrier, where snow is constantly falling such that the ground was frosted, it still wouldn't cause such a severe result due to slippage." This explanation was very shameless, but because it was shameless, it was another way of apologizing. Chen Changsheng and Tang 36 both didn't know what to say. "I will come back again." Tian Hai Xing Shui got on the horse and said to Chen Changsheng. Chen Changsheng thought a bit and said, "If you want to come to the Tradition Academy, I won't accept you." Tian Hai Xing Shui laughed, but he was extremely angry. He didn't say much more and left. Fei Dian shook his head as he looked at Jin Yulu and said, "You are not Zhou Dufu, you can't change anything." Jin Yulu covered his hands with his sleeves again. He paid no attention to Fei Dian. The rain in the morning finally stopped. The people surrounding 100 Blossom Street gradually walked away. From the early morning to now, the thing that happened in front of the gate of the Tradition Academy was witnessed by many. From the surface, this was a clash between Tian Hai Xing Shui and the Tradition Academy. In fact, people all knew that this was a battle between the great Zhou's new powers and the old royal family. It was also a fight between the Pope and other elders in the capital. It was just that the power that Tradition Academy belonged to was obviously much weaker. The opponent simply sent out Tian Hai Xing Shui, who had just came back from the snow barrier, but on the other end was Prince Chen Lu and the Department of the Traditional Education. Both came here to protect the Tradition Academy, which one could say, showed how much Prince Chen Lu and the Department of Traditional Education valued the Tradition Academy, but actually, on the Tradition Academy's side, there was simply no one else who could step in and help. Prince Chen Lu saluted to the 3 students of the Tradition Academy. Chen Changsheng returned a salute, but he didn't say anything thankful. Instead, he said, "In the palace, Prince, you had said that this was a thing between you big figures, and that an insignificant figure like me was to be disregarded by you guys, so I won't thank you. Thank indeed is not necessary." Prince Chen Lu looked at him and smiled. He added, "But after the Ivy Festival, the entire continent knows you are Su Yurong's fiancé, so you are no longer that common youngster. You will no longer be ignored by us, so I won't feel sorry for you either. Chen Changsheng became quiet. At this point, he finally remembered the influence of revealing the engagement. Many people didn't want him to marry Su Yurong, and of course, the Tianhai family didn't want it either. What happened in the morning today was probably caused by this reason. If there's anything, just let me know. After saying this sentence, Prince Qianlu didn't intentionally stay to show his kindness, he just left calmly. The thin man glanced at Chen Changsheng and followed holding the umbrella. Officer Xian came and spoke several sentences. Then he harshly scolded Tianhai family's savageness with Tang 36 and left. It wasn't until now that Xian Yuanpe finally put down the door. He had carried the heavy door plank for so long, and although he was a Yao, it still made him very tired. I'll go bury the horse in a bit. When do we fix the door? He asked. Looking at the ruined gate, Chen Changsheng shook his head and said, we don't fix it. Tang 36 said, if you want the Tianhai family to fix the door, then you should force them to give away their reputation before. What if they actually gave away their reputation and fixed it? What should we do? Chen Changsheng said, it's pretty good to just leave the gate broken like this. Xian Yuanpe rubbed his head. Looking at the wooden pieces and rocks, he couldn't find a reason why this was good. You are improved. Jin Yulu smiled and said, you finally learned how to obtain the biggest profit. If the gate of the Tradition Academy was left unfixed, day by day, people in the capital would gradually feel that the Tianhai family was rampant and savage. Chen Changsheng remained quiet for a bit and then said, Elder, I don't like such improvement. I don't like it either. Jin Yulu patted his shoulder, consoling him, but what should we do? There are so many villains in the world. Unless you mimic me and hide in mountain to farm, there will always be some changes that you have to accept. Chapter 92, The Watchman, Conversation, and People on the Bed. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chen Changsheng thanked Jin Yulu. If it wasn't for him, no matter how bravely Tang 36 and Xian Yuanpe fought, they wouldn't be able to protect the Tradition Academy before Prince Qianlu and Officer Xian arrived. Jin Yulu looked at him and smiled, since you are the teacher of my princess, then you are one of us. Hearing this, Chen Changsheng felt a little embarrassed. This man standing in front of him was a truly legendary character, and the only reason why he was present at the Tradition Academy to help these three youngsters was because of Luo Luo's request. Although Luo Luo wasn't in Tradition Academy right now, her heart was still here. This made Chen Changsheng joyous. Are you going to stay at Tradition Academy? Xian Yuanpe looked at Jin Yulu and inquired with respect. Chen Changsheng and Tang 36 thought to themselves, although Jin Yulu had said to Tianhai Xingxue that he had no reason to be at Li Palace, he still needed to take care of Luo Luo. How can he stay here? They suggested Xian Yuanpe not say any more. It's not impossible for me to stay. Jin Yulu saw the looks between the three youngsters, laughed out loud and said, I have never done anything wrong in my life because I don't have anything that I really like except money. Chen Changsheng saw the coin figures on his clothes. He laughed knowing that Jin Yulu was ready to stay. Chen Changsheng bowed to show his gratitude. Tang 36 came close to Jin Yulu. He held Jin Yulu's moderately coarse hand and shook it many times. He said, you definitely know my family. My family doesn't have anything, besides money. We lack anything but money. Wen Shui Tang family was a famous and rich family. After 1,000 years of saving, it had an endless amount of money. During the rebellion around 10 years ago, the old royal family found Tang family for the first time and tried to get their support. Although they didn't succeed, but it could be imagined how rich Tang family is. Excluding Princess, the Tradition Academy already has us 3 students. We just need a teacher. Chen Changsheng looked at Jin Yulu, bowed down and said, Sir, please stay to teach us. Jin Yulu's Shoshing stage was even higher than the elder of Mountainly, Xiao Song Gong. He was probably at a similar level to the principal of the Heavenly Academy, Mao Qiuyu. In addition, with his vast experience in Shoshing, he was more than qualified to be a teacher in the Tradition Academy. However, he didn't accept Chen Chongsheng's request. He laughed, shook his head and said, "How is it reasonable for a student to ask someone to be a teacher?" Feeling helpless, Chen Chongsheng said, "Right now, the Tradition Academy only has students. We don't even have a principal." Jin Yulu looked at him and said sincerely, "Since the bishop gave both roster and key to you, then he obviously had his own thoughts." Chen Chongsheng didn't know what the bishop was thinking. He was only focused on what role Jin Yulu should play during his stay at the Tradition Academy. He frowned and pondered. "According to your wish, I think the gate won't be fixed at least any time soon. It will be like this for a long time." Jin Yulu looked at the broken gate and said, "Since it's a school, the most important thing is to study. Even if there are only 3 students, your regular learning time shouldn't be disturbed. Since your gate is broken, you probably need a janitor." Understanding his meaning, Chen Chongsheng felt surprised. How would he agree to that? "I farmed in the East Hill outside of the White Emperor's city for several hundreds of years. What do I need to be afraid about as a janitor?" Jin Yulu smiled and said. He did not give the 3 youngsters any chance to refuse. He told them that he was going to get some materials to build a small room by the door and left. Xian Yuanpe felt very happy. On the other hand, Chen Chongsheng and Tang 36 looked at each other and remained wordless. They both thought to themselves, did they really just let such an epic figure like Jin Yulu be a janitor? If they did, then they were setting the standard way too high. From now on, who would dare to disturb the Tradition Academy? The fall rain had already stopped and the fog of the morning gradually disappeared. Xian Yuanpe went to the east wall to dig a hole and bury the horse. He didn't need Chen Chongsheng's help, so Chen Chongsheng thought a bit and realized that he was lacking sleep. He decided to return to his small building to sleep, but he was dragged to the front of the library by Tang 36. "Before, when Tian Hai Xingxue and his soldiers arrived, I was actually scared." Tang 36 looked at him and said. Chen Chongsheng said, "Everyone is afraid of death. It is a very normal thing. You don't have to feel down on yourself." Tang 36 looked at him and spoke seriously, "Yes, everyone is afraid of death, so when faced against that situation, everyone should be scared, but back then, I glimpsed at you and I actually didn't see any fear on your face. I was shocked." Chen Chongsheng thought a while and said, "You know that I am kind of dull. Maybe I simply didn't show fear on my face yet." "No," Tang 36 shook his head and insisted. "I could tell that you were not scared back there." Remaining silent for a while, Chen Chongsheng asked, "So? What is your point?" Tang 36 said, "Under such circumstances, since you were not scared at all, then there can only be 2 possibilities. The first is that you guessed that Luo Luo would send Jin Yulu here and didn't need to be afraid. But obviously, you also didn't know that Jin Yulu would come help." Chen Chongsheng asked, "Then what's the other possibility?" Tang 36 replied, "The second is that you are not afraid of death at all." Chen Chongsheng rubbed his head and said, "As I said before, everyone is afraid of death." Tang 36 felt very worried. He said, "I have been believing this too, so I think you definitely have some sort of secret or something must have happened recently." Chen Chongsheng sighed and said, "You think I look like someone that wants to die?" Tang 36 responded, "Certainly not. Plus, since you can have Su Yurong as your wife, then there's no way you want to die." Chen Chongsheng asked, "So what are you worrying about?" Tang 36 gazed into his eyes and asked, "Are you sick?" Chen Chongsheng didn't know that this kid was actually this smart. He couldn't believe that Tang 36 was able to guess it after observing so many little details. But of course, it was also that this kid cared a lot about him. He felt a bit warm inside, but his face turned cold. He replied, "You are sick." Seeing his face turned cold, Tang 36 then realized how inappropriate his words were and how much nonsense he was saying. He suddenly remembered another thing and he asked seriously, "In the beginning, did you really not know that Tian Hai Xing Shui was the Divine Queen's grandnephew?" Chen Changsheng stayed quiet for a while and said, "I knew." Tang 36 thought to himself, "I knew it. Although you lived in remote village and after arriving in the capital, you also spent all your time in the Tradition Academy studying Xiuxing, since you could guess that he was from the Tian Hai family, then surely you could guess Tian Hai Xing Shui's identity based on his age and temperament." Why? He was asking why Chen Changsheng pretended to not know that he cursing at the Divine Queen in front of so many people. "Because I wanted to know Divine Queen's attitude towards the Tradition Academy." Chen Changsheng said, "If the Queen really doesn't want the Tradition Academy to continue to exist in the capital, then all she needs to say is one sentence. The Tradition Academy would disappear so there would be no conflict at all." Tang 36 said, "They are guessing the Queen's thought." "They can guess, but I don't want to guess," Chen Changsheng said. "I come to the capital to study Xiuxing. I want to participate in the great trial, my time is very precious. The Tradition Academy is facing a lot of trouble, one after another. This is too troublesome." Tang 36 lifted his eyebrows and asked, "So? I cursed at her directly so the words will definitely be delivered to the palace. No one dares to keep it hidden." After taking a pause, Chen Changsheng said, "Then we should know the Queen's attitude towards the Tradition Academy soon." Tang 36 suddenly felt a bit cold and said, "You want to see whether or not the knife will fall? Do you really want to die?" Chen Changsheng looked at him and said, "At least it's better than having a knife always hanging right above your head. So I didn't say anything wrong. You truly are not afraid of death." Looking at him, Tang 36 said shockingly, "What kind of disease do you have?" "I don't have any." Chen Changsheng smiled and said, "I know how to cure diseases." There was a sentence that he still hid in the bottom of his heart. The incurable disease was no longer a disease, but fate. Fake, too fake. Tang 36 sighed continuously and then he explained, "You are about to surpass that prince's status." Chen Changsheng didn't expect him to suddenly mention Prince Chen Lu. He felt a bit surprised so he asked, "How did Prince Chen Lu offend you?" Tang 36 said, "Didn't you notice? Previously when he got off the wagon, he mismatched one of his buttons. So? If not, then how could he demonstrate his hurry and his concern for the Tradition Academy?" "You think too much." Chen Changsheng admired this kid's observation skills but he disagreed with his thinking. "Anyway, I don't like Prince Chen Lu. He's too fake. Or maybe that's because he also doesn't like you. I am so real. If he doesn't like me, then it is because he is fake." You can replace the word real with unrestrained. Whatever, he's still fake. If you weren't a pinhole like yourself, who would notice the detail that Prince Chen Lu mismatched one of his buttons? In the code of ancestors in my family, there were similar words. It's most accurate to look people through coin holes. There are holes in ancient Chinese coins. Chen Changsheng shook his head and stopped saying anything. He thought to himself, even if Prince Chen Lu's action was intentional, as the only Chen royal family member staying in the capital, he was lonely so it was understandable that he wanted to gain the support from the elders of the tradition by helping the Tradition Academy. After Xian Yuan buried the horse under the east wall, he came back and heard the two people's conversation. He kept shaking his head and said, "You guys are so young but you already think things are so complicated. Humans are indeed too guileful and can't interact with you." Back to the bedroom in the small building, Chen Changxing felt his eyelids were heavy. He was very sleepy. His feeling was also very heavy because his clear and calm studying life, from now on, was gone and would never return. He was worried about the Divine Queen's attitude after his words this morning were passed to the palace. No matter what way it was looked at, a good thing was not going to happen. In the discarded garden in the royal palace, Missouri, you had said that he was using others and that he was manipulating, but actually, these were all taught by Luo Luo. After all, she was the only daughter of the White Emperor. Although she didn't have any siblings and she didn't experience any palace competitions, as a member of the royal family, Luo Luo knew such things innately. But how about him? He was excellent at calculating, not manipulating. Authors trying to make a pun, sorta, calculating in Chinese pronounced, Ji Swan, manipulating, Swan Ji. Like how he said to Jin Yu Lu, he truly disliked it. This made him very tired. He walked to the bed and was about to rest a bit more, but suddenly, he stopped. He went to the closet next to the window, took down the short sword and then walked to the bed again. No pause. It was very natural. That person didn't even react. Chen Changsheng looked at the bed. The joints on his fingers holding onto the handle turned somewhat white. There was someone hiding under the quilt. Chapter 93, Blame It on the Rain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next moment, Chen Changcheng relaxed his tension a bit because he saw long black hair on the bed. He did not relax because the person was female, but because if she was indeed an assassin, she wouldn't have revealed her location this easily and she definitely wouldn't have slept on someone's bed. Raindrops hit the window and the splashing sound disturbed the lady on the bed. She turned around but didn't wake up. Faintly, silk earplugs could be seen through her hair. Her complexion was just as beautiful as usual, but perhaps due to her state of sleeping, her usual coldness and power was nowhere to be found. Looking at her beautiful complexion, Chen Changsheng was shocked. He never would have thought this person was Mou. As the person most trusted by the Divine Queen, she should be very busy. Why was she in this small building of the Tradition Academy and why was she napping on his bed? Mou really needed some sleep. For some reason, she slept sweetly and didn't even need to think of plots and strategies in her dreams. She was extremely relaxed and she snored softly. Sometimes, her tongue would reach out and lick the corner of her lips. This was not to seduce anyone, but it was more like an act of an innocent child. Chen Changsheng wrinkled his eyebrows. He couldn't understand what was happening. Looking at the make-up that was left over between her eyes and was surprised that this cunning yet beautiful woman had this innocent and tired side. He placed the short sword back into its sheath. If Mou was here to kill him, he would be dead even if he held the legendary frozen spear. He pushed Mou's body a little. Although his finger didn't touch her body directly due to the separation of the blanket, he still felt the sensation from his fingertips. Her skin was soft and silky. Just when his finger landed on the blanket, Mou opened her eyes. Although she didn't nap for too long, it was still of good quality. She slept much better here than at the Royal Palace or the Orange Garden. She was satisfied and her eyes were half shut. They were like the willow leaves around the lake, filled with joy. Then she saw Chen Changsheng and remembered where she was, what she was going to do and why she slept. Her eyes became serious and her joy became like the shadow of willow leaves on the surface of the lake as they are destroyed by a silly kid throwing a stone. Her expression turned seldom and the joy in her eyes vanished. Instead, it was replaced by chilling glares. She blinked and was now fully awake. She was calm as usual. Not laughing, not cold and not seductive, just calm. In just a short period of time, she turned from an innocent kid to a cold, powerful figure and then to a regular woman. The transition was quick and flawless. Looking at this scene, Chen Changsheng was impressed. If she was wearing so many masks in her life, will she remember her true self in the end? What time is it? Mou asked. Chen Changsheng answered her. Mou glanced outside of the window and saw the wet leaves in the autumn rain. She said, the sound of autumn rain falling on the window is making people falling asleep. After finishing her sentence, she stood up and walked towards the bronze mirror next to the window. She took out a comb from her sleeve and started brushing her hair. Her actions were naturally and she didn't show a sign of embarrassment or nervousness. It was as if she wasn't in the Tradition Academy, but rather her own house in the Orange Garden. Chen Changsheng's eyes moved from her pretty belt around her waist onto her face reflected from the mirror. He saw the leftover make-up up on her face and the fatigue between her eyes and said, "You seem to be very tired." He was sure that only people who are truly tired and under constant stress could sleep as sweetly as she did earlier. Mou's hand that held the comb froze for a moment. Then, she continued to brush her hair. She mocked, "What does a child understand?" From her perspective, Chen Changsheng was just a child. Chen Changsheng replied, "Even a child wouldn't go to another person's house to sleep." Mou's hand that held the comb froze again. "I heard Tradition Academy would be lively today, so I came to check. But I didn't expect it would be so boring that I would fall asleep," she answered calmly. In fact, she was a little embarrassed, but she couldn't let Chen Changsheng know that she was embarrassed or else the situation would be even more embarrassing for her. Just like what she did earlier, right after waking up, she blamed the autumn rain for making her fall asleep. In truth, even she didn't understand why she was sleeping, and why on Chen Changsheng's bed. She could only think of reasons such as Chen Changsheng was just a kid and he was unrelated to the business in the court. Therefore, she was relaxed when facing him and the scent of the blanket that was really good. It was the scent of sun, but not as harsh. It was the smell of rain, but not as humid. It was the taste of apple, but not as sweet. All in all, it was a pleasant smell. Mou realized she was thinking too much and she wrinkled her eyebrows. She was a little confused. Then she looked at her face in the bronze mirror and was a little displeased. She said, "I never expected such a big mirror in the room of a youngster. I don't see any makeup on your face, and you don't seem to be a person who cares about appearances that much. With a mirror, one can adjust their clothing, but they can also adjust their attitude." Chen Changsheng explained. "True." Mou stopped for a moment and continued combing her hair. Few moments later, her dark hair was as smooth as before. She reached her finger out of the window. Although she was far from the rain, a drop of water formed on her fingertip. This scene was beautiful. If an ordinary people who knew nothing about shushing saw this, they would think it was a miracle. Chen Changsheng knew this was the powerful control of star-fusing Xiaxingists on their surroundings. But he didn't understand why she did this. Mou pressed her fingertip slightly on the space between her eyebrows and rubbed slowly. The leftover makeup came off as the water spread around her face as if a blossoming tree scattered its flowers. Chen Changsheng then realized why she used her power and perfect precision to form the water drop on her fingertip. She used it to take off her makeup. He was confused by the actions of a woman. For this, he had a very different opinion, but after some thought, he held his tongue. "Do you know what the Queen said?" Mou asked after she took off the leftover makeup from last night. Chen Changsheng was silent. Previously, he had told Tang 36 that he wanted to know the Divine Queen's opinion, but now that it was actually happening, he suddenly didn't want to know anymore. The Queen said, "Kids just like to fool around." Mou didn't turn around, but she continued, "Although you are also a kid, the Queen wasn't talking about you." Chen Changsheng knew that perhaps even until today, the Divine Queen never heard of his name. The kid she talked about was Luo Luo. Emperor Bai and his wife sent Princess Luo Luo to the Queen to take care of her. The Queen is her elder and therefore if she is mentoring her, Princess Luo Luo must obey her words. Previously the princess was studying at the Tradition Academy and recognized you as her teacher. The Queen didn't want to bother with your business because she regarded this as a game, but you guys made too big of a mess at the Ivy Festival. Mou looked into the mirror and saw the reflection of the youngster. The Queen doesn't want the princess to fool around with you anymore. Chen Changsheng lowered his head and stared at the floor. He was silent. Don't rely on Princess Luo Luo's name. You will be left with nothing if the Queen spoke even a word against you. You must understand this. I never had anything in the capital and so, I have nothing to lose. Chen Chongqing replied. What about your life? I'm surprised that you are still standing in front of me. It seems that Tian Hai Xing Shui is more careful now than before. Oh right, you know nothing about that guy. Don't be mistaken, although he seems like a sane person, Tian Hai Ye isn't even close to his level when Tian Hai Xing Shui goes crazy. If he never went training in the Snowing Gate and concealed his temper, you would have probably died in front of Tradition Academy's door this morning. Chen Chongqing raised his head and looked at her in the mirror. General Tian Hai's temper is still not good. This morning, he truly wanted to kill me. The reason I can still stand here right now isn't because he showed mercy, but rather because he couldn't kill me. He continued, just like last night, I was able to show the marriage vow to the entire world. It's not because you showed mercy, but rather because you couldn't seal me. Mou raised her eyebrows slightly. She wasn't particularly happy. Usually you don't talk as much. I also think it's strange. No matter in front of Wei Yang Palace, in the ruined garden, or right now, I always talk more when facing you. Mou turned around and looked at Chen Chongqing quietly. For some reason she shook her head. She didn't understand. Although this youngster was so ordinary, why Princess Luo Luo respected him so much. Even Su Yurong sent letters herself to talk about him. Even if Chen Chongqing behaved extraordinarily at the Ivy Festival, she still couldn't understand. What she cared and was most confused about was still that question. How did you leave the Tong Palace? Chen Chongqing didn't answer, he just looked at her. At that moment, Mou had already taken off her makeup. Her skin was white and smooth. Her eyebrows were sharp and her eyes were lively. She seemed to be a lady around 28 years old. But she wasn't a naive lady. She was the most powerful official of Zhou dynasty. She was behind the plans of Luo Luo leaving Tradition Academy for Academy of Li Palace, and she hinted the members of Tian Hai family to come this morning. She was the mastermind behind all this and she was also the biggest enemy of Tradition Academy right now. Some people think the rise of Tradition Academy and you symbolize something. But both you and I know that it is all a coincidence. She looked at Chen Chongqing and said, previously, Su Shiji requested me to do something, but his daughter sent me a letter as well. I didn't know how to handle this situation after thinking about it for a long time. Therefore, I forced you into the Tradition Academy and waited for nature to take its course. But I never expected that you would encounter Princess Luo Luo here and rise from this graveyard. Chen Chongqing said, yes, this is how things went. Mou's expression gradually turned cold, one of my random actions made such a mess. But how can this trouble me? I don't care about the existence of the Tradition Academy. I only care about the completion of my goal. Chen Chongqing asked, what are you trying to do? Everything will end the same way it began and so will this. Since this trouble started from the marriage vow, then let's end it with the marriage vow. Take out the marriage vow and disband the agreement. It's your best choice to start over. Su Yurong has recognized this marriage vow. Did you ever think about the reason why she recognized this marriage vow? Do you really think she likes you? You really believe that a woman like her would marry a stranger just because of her parents' words? Or do you think that she really cares about keeping promises? Mou looked at him and said, since you were able to debate with Go Hanshi, you are obviously a smart person. The moment you saw the letter brought by the crane last night, you should have already realized her intention. Why are you pretending to know nothing about it? Aren't you ashamed of being used as an excuse? Chapter 94, Fight the Whole Capital, Part 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chen Chongqing understood what she meant. If the rumor was true and Su Yurong actually didn't want to marry Qiu Shangjun or for that matter, anyone at all, then the best excuse was to refuse anyone other than him. This allowed her to perfectly shut everyone's mouth. That piece of paper would be her best reason and he would be the indestructible signboard behind her. Yes, this explanation described the current situation the best, and also perfectly corresponded to the words that Su Yurong specifically wanted Shuang Er to bring to Chen Changsheng. Please don't misunderstand. However, Chen Changsheng didn't agree with Mo's words regardless of their meaning only because she said it in such a harsh way. It looks like the relationship between you and the Miss of Su Mansion is not as good as I imagined. Chen Changsheng offered. This has nothing to do with whether or not our relationship is close or not. Demons have already rested in the north for several hundred years, so the human world needs to maintain the union with Yao and also maintain its union internally. The connection between the south and the north is a very essential thing. Su Yurong and Qiu Shanjun's engagement may not actually change this relationship, but it was at least a symbol. Also, it was the symbol that the entire continent used to judge her thinking and actions as very unwise. But you can't do anything to her, so you say these words intentionally to agitate me. Don't you think this is the truth? Any truth needs to be confirmed as truth after it actually happens. Chen Changsheng thought about the words he spoke in the discarded garden. It could be not nullified because he didn't want to waste another's youth and life, but he encountered too many things in the capital. It taught him to not believe in things too easily and that some words needed to be heard in person to be considered true. To make me to cancel this engagement is actually not too difficult. Just tell Miss Su to talk to me herself. He looked at Mou and said, everyone says she has the tolerance of a phoenix, but at least on this thing, I don't see it. Mou suddenly said, actually, I am making this more complicated than it actually is. Chen Changsheng said, this thing troubles me too. Mou's black hair gradually spread out and her thin eyebrow looked like sword. She stared at him and said, if I could, I would rather kill you using one finger. Even at a young age, she was already an elite at star-fusing stage, and had the Divine Queen's trust. In the Great Zhou dynasty, it could be said that she was only below one person and above everyone else. She was truly a great person, but she was forced to manage this engagement. There were also some other reasons why she couldn't do things freely which contributed to her gloominess. Chen Changsheng sensed the danger. Just now, he remembered that the beautiful girl in front of him was not a commoner. He gazed at her eyes and asked, you came to the Tradition Academy today and had people from the Tianhai family do what you wanted them to do. Does the queen know about this? Mou laughed contemptuously but didn't say a word. She could acquire the queen's trust, and in only a few years, could climb to the peak from being just a common official. Besides her own ability, the most important reason for this was because she was good at understanding the queen's intention. There were many things that, for a variety of reasons, the divine queen could not outwardly show, and sometimes when the queen couldn't reveal her true intention, Mou would work on it silently behind the scenes to help the queen accomplish them properly. Such as this engagement representing the connection between the south and north. Mou had never failed in this aspect, and she understood clearly what the queen wanted. The bishop in the Department of the Traditional Education, the other elders in the Li Palace and other people who had a lot of authority in the tradition seemed to want to protect the Tradition Academy, but they actually were just using you. Don't you see this? I was arranged by you to study in the Tradition Academy. Looking into her eyes, Chen Changsheng said, if the elders of the tradition really wanted to use me, and eventually used me successfully, then before the queen's anger fell on my head, it should fall on you first. Is this why you are so urgent in forcing me to cancel the engagement? To compensate your own fault. Mou's feeling changed slightly. It was unsure if this was because he spoke out the thing she was worried about, but then she laughed out contemptuously, the queen's trust in me is known to the entire continent. Little kid, you actually think these few meaningless words will have an impact? Chen Changsheng replied, yes. It's only by chance that you arranged me into the Tradition Academy. The queen probably will not suspect any other intentions of you, but she will remember this. It's your random decision that is causing her honor to be challenged. Right now the queen still likes you and trusts you, so there's no problem, but one day in the future, if the queen no longer likes you and trusts you, then this event will come back to get you. Mou slightly raised her thin eyebrows, emitting a stronger sword spirit. Indeed, the current situation of the Tradition Academy is somewhat tense, but the situation you are facing is actually not so good either. Chen Changxing said, just like the day I said in the garden, I will not cancel the engagement on my own unless she comes and discusses it with me. In this regard, you do not have any power, so please return to your mansion and think of some other methods. Mou thought what she heard was very interesting. Her thin eyebrows slowly simmered down, and her voice slowly turned calm. A little kid like you dares to tell me to leave. Chen Changxing said, no, I don't dare to, I am asking you to leave. Mou laughed for real because she found it very surprising. How dare you treat me like this? Chen Changxing said, dissidence of opinion makes it useless to talk. In this conversation, he appeared to look like an adult, but in reality, he was only a youngster. It looks like he is well spoken because of his ability to speak sharply, but with his still immature face and his swinging of his arm, he actually looked very cute and very dull. To Mou, only cuteness and dullness were true about Chen Changxing. So Mou also became angry for real. She perceived the previous words as words to speak against her, but at last, she became certain that Chen Changxing actually wasn't scared of her. Since she began to serve for the Divine Queen, no one dared to treat her like this. In addition, no one dared to tell her to leave, not the Prime Minister, not the noblemen in the Tian Ji family, and not even the big figures in the tradition. Even the Pope treated her kindly, but Chen Changxing did it. Are you really not afraid of death? She bit her lip and said harshly. Chen Changxing said honestly, if you can kill me, then last night next to the Black Dragon Pond I would already be dead. And since I didn't die, then there are definitely reasons why you can't kill me. So I am afraid of death, but I am not afraid of you. The more real the words are, the more it hurts people, so his words hurt the most. Mou's eyes turned colder and colder. True, I promised someone that I can't kill you. But there are still so many other people who want to kill you. Even if there is an engagement arranged, so what? It's impossible for you to marry Su Yurong, and it's impossible for her to marry you. Because she's the unique phoenix of the continent, her status is holy, and her marriage with Qiu Shanjun has been talked about for years. Everything related to her, in people's hearts, should be the finest. Now, a dirt like you appears and thinks people will be fine with it. Looking at Chen Changxing, she sneered, do you know what you are doing? You are destroying everyone's beautiful imagination or expectation. These imaginations and expectations are admittedly childish, but if you successfully make the entire world unhappy, do you know how this world is going to treat you? With that, Mou left the Tradition Academy. Chen Changxing, as the owner of the Tradition Academy, sent her away. He didn't walk with her to the entrance, but instead, he stayed in the school in the depths of the forest. He watched her pass through forest and eventually disappear. He stood in place for a long time. There's a wall in the forest. It is the wall between the Tradition Academy and the herb garden. The wall extends into the depth of the forest. Faintly, the evidence of erosion on the wall can be seen, and there was a thick layer of moss on the bricks. Between the bricks, there was a gate that had not been opened for a long time. That was the wall to the royal palace. Mou returned to the royal palace through that gate. Normally, standing on the lake or big pagoda tree, he could faintly see the structure of the royal palace, so he knew that the royal palace was near. But today, he found out that there was actually a gate in the depths of the Tradition Academy. He didn't know that the royal palace was actually so close. Because of the Ivy Festival, he went to the royal palace once. He remembered the huge group of buildings, he remembered the middle-aged woman by the pond, and of course, he couldn't forget about the Frost Almighty Dragon who was imprisoned by iron chain under the Black Dragon Pond for countless years. He had promised the Black Dragon that he would go visit when there was time to chat. He didn't forget about his promise, but he didn't know when he could go to the royal palace again. However, after finding out about the old door covered with mosses today, he suddenly realized that it was actually possible. Yet the royal palace was huge. Even if he took the risk to sneak in, how could he find that discarded garden? That night when he was able to find the Wei Yang Palace, he owed it to the black goat. Now that he didn't have the black goat, he didn't dare to go in blindly. The words that Mou said before leaving soon became real. After the rain stopped, several hundreds of youngsters came to the entrance of the Tradition Academy. There were students from the Heavenly Academy, workers in the 13 divisions of Green Light and scholars from the capital, but the majority of them were common people. The group was very diverse, but they all had the same idea. People surrounded the Tradition Academy's broken door. They waved their arms furiously and shouted. "Tell the kid with the last name Chen to roll out. What a villain, everyone can kill Kim. Who do you think you are? How dare you want to marry Su Yurong? You think you are Qiu Shanjun? Give up the fake contract. Countrymen, get out of the capital. You are only an ugly toad compared to Su Yurong. How dare you eat the phoenix?" Harsh scoldings echoed in the entrance of the Tradition Academy. The sound became louder and louder. The words became harsher and harsher. Countrymen, shameless thief, and at last, it turned into dirty curses. More and more people came to the entrance of the Tradition Academy to either join in the cursing or to spectate the rage. After all, by now, the entire capital didn't show any kindness to the Tradition Academy. Chapter 95, Fighting the Whole Capital, Part 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Where did the hatred of the entire capital towards the Tradition Academy, or more accurately speaking, towards the youngster of the Tradition Academy, come from? Obviously it was because of the engagement. In the capital, Su Yurong is a name that cannot be profaned. Because of her identity as the successor to the Virgin of the South, her innate phoenix bloodline, the divine queen's favor, and most importantly, her beauty, in the eyes of the Zhou people, she was perfect. Obviously she had many, many young men and even women adoring her. Yet at the same time, because she was so perfect, the adoration ultimately turns into respect such that people only dared to imagine about her at night. They didn't dare reveal any thoughts in public because that would only provoke others' laugh. It was a blasphemy. When the news of the event that happened at the Ivy Festival spread throughout the entire capital, the situation changed drastically. Among the men who loved Su Yurong, the older ones could still remain calm, but the younger men could no longer suppress their inner emotions. They decided to go to the Tradition Academy to express their anger. Years ago, no one would go to protest near the mansion where the southern ambassadors were stationed in capital, and of course, no one would scold or curse Qiu Shanjun. Why? Because Qiu Shanjun was also perfect. The relationship between Su Yurong and him was acknowledged by the government and the public. This thinking was very complex and somewhat hard to explain. Because of Chen Changsheng and the engagement that caused Su Yurong to be no longer as perfect, and Qiu Shanjun to be no longer as invincible, the young men began to use their furor as excuse to announce their existence. The most important reason was still because the youngster with the engagement was named Chen Changsheng, a kid that no one heard of. People gathered some information about him, and knew that he was only a freshman at the Tradition Academy. He was very common, but when they gathered some more information and found out that he actually couldn't xiuxing, they saw him as trash. How could they stand this? We were incomparable to Qiu Shanjun, but who was that dude named Chen Changsheng? A simpler saying is, if even a Taoist monk can touch her, then why can't I? A young Taoist monk from Xining town wants to marry Miss Su. Just like the sentence that people use the most at the entrance of the Tradition Academy. You are only an ugly toad compared to Su Yurong, how dare you eat the phoenix? The voice of hatred and curses got louder and louder. It passed from the entrance to the library. Holding a scroll named Fa Huawei, Chen Changsheng read silently, as if he didn't hear the voices at all and was oblivious of what was going on. How could Tang 36 stay as calm as him? He had already taken his Wen Shui sword out of its sheath, and held it in his hand. The sword reflected the color of the green sky in the fall and appeared indescribably cold. Xian Yuanpa also walked down the staircase preparing to use the door again. Seeing that Chen Changsheng had no reaction, Tang 36 said angrily, how can you still bear it? If you don't do anything, after today, you will become the most famous, ugly toad in history. Then what is the Tradition Academy? A pond cultivating toads. Xian Yuanpe added, yeah, are we supposed to be like you? Are we all toads? Looking at Tang 36, Chen Changsheng said, is it true that I will become what they call me? Then if I call you brute, will you really grow into a monster? This joke is not funny at all. If I will get cursed, I would rather get cursed as a brute than an ugly toad. After all, a brute did some brutal things, so he deserves to be called that. But how about you? You didn't harm Su Yurong in any way and you have a legal engagement, how can you still let them scold you like that? After saying this, Tang 36 stopped bothering to care about him. He just marched up to the entrance with his Wen Shui sword. Seeing this situation, Xian Yuanpe immediately lugged the door that was about 2 men tall and followed up. Chen Changsheng was dazed. He put down the scroll, stood up and began walking to the entrance to take a look. After all, this was his own matter. Give the Chen dude up. Kick him out of the capital. How dare you fake the engagement? Why don't you take a look at yourself at the mirror? For making such a big lie, aren't you afraid of getting punished by heaven? Dongyu General's mansion wouldn't bother to care about what you did, but we, in the name of justice, will teach you what's right and wrong. More and more people surrounded the entrance of the Tradition Academy. By the afternoon, there were actually more than 1,000 people. It was a huge crowd. The voice of cursing and scolding became louder and louder, which caused the atmosphere in the field to become more and more chaotic. In the morning, the Tianhai family had sent people to break the door so the school was free to enter. Moreover, the people in the Tradition Academy didn't respond to those people at all, so the young men couldn't control their emotions any longer. As the righteous ardor rose up and filled their brains, they shouted, let's go in and take the villain out. Young people often become passionate and agitated easily for no reason, and they could also be easily triggered to break things. Along with the shout, Hong, the huge crowd all ran into the Tradition Academy. Immediately, Hong. Infinite waves of qi violently shot out from the entrance of Tradition Academy. The remaining rainwater on the ground was triggered by qi, floated up and shot out like infinite arrows leaving the bow. They made thousands of holes in the leaves near the street. The young men who were running towards the Tradition Academy all cried in pain and fell down. They had to push against the ground to support themselves, which caused bruises on their hands. The people who ran the fastest and had already ran into the Tradition Academy, were all pushed more than 30 meters back by the wave. They fell unconscious. Blood was over their body. No one knew if they were still alive. The cursing and yelling that had been going on for over half an hour outside the Tradition Academy suddenly stopped. The street suddenly became quiet. Only the young scholars' painful cries could be heard. Jin Yulu, wearing an expensive silk robe, slowly walked out from a small house next to the entrance of the Tradition Academy. He held a precious and well-known soil pot from Xian province with his left hand, and rubbed 2 jewel balls with his right hand. He looked very relaxed and casual. He stood on the stone staircase, looked up at the sky and applauded. The fall rain stopped a long time ago, so now it looks like the blue sky had just been washed. It was truly beautiful. However, he looked back at the huge crowd in front of the entrance, turned cold and said, do you want to die? He didn't use any qi when saying this sentence, so when the people heard it, they didn't feel like the spring thunder had just arrived, but the silent street looked like it because of the pathetic situation on the ground made an annotation to his sentence. At least several dozens of people had scratches on their head with blood flowing down, and there were even a few people who had blood coming out all over their bodies remaining unconscious. Who are you? A daring youngster among the crowd said with a shaking voice. How dare you cause violence and kill people? Since someone initiated, following up was a relatively easy thing. So a few more voices came up. Seeing their friends' tragic situations now, people became more and more angry, and their voices got louder and louder. The silence was broken and the atmosphere became agitated again. Criminal. Report him now. Today, the 100 Blossom Street was so crowded that even water couldn't penetrate through to hit the ground. Hearing the words in the front, there were actually some people in the back left. They were probably going to the police department. There were also enthusiastic residents helping the wounded people to stand up, and there were even some doctors that tended to the fainted people. If you ignored the reason why these people surrounded the Tradition Academy, then the scene actually looked a bit touching. Since when was the capital so collaborative? Collaboration is power. There were already people going to report him. Later on, the court would definitely send people here to punish this criminal who wore like a countryman. Such confirmation is also a power. People no longer felt as scared, and ran towards the school again. Jin Yulu took a bamboo chair from somewhere, sat down and drank a bit of tea from his pot while facing at the crowd. Some people already came around 10 meters away from the stone staircase. However, after glancing at him casually, they suddenly felt scared and retreated back as fast as possible without even caring about stepping on people's feet behind them. The huge crowd suddenly started a wave of retreat. Just a glance was so powerful. Jin Yulu obviously wouldn't feel proud of such little thing. Looking at people, he said indifferently, "I am the janitor of the Tradition Academy. The Tradition Academy is a serious place for education. Please don't come in without permission. Anyone who dares to step in will be made as examples." People then remembered, this middle-aged who wore like a rich businessman, previously walked out from the little house next to the entrance. Yet which school would have such strong janitor? Even the Heavenly Academy wouldn't. From yesterday to today morning, the fall rain continued. The temperature suddenly dropped, and the weather gradually turned colder. People looked at their friends crying, especially at those who were fainted. Then they looked at the middle-aged man who claimed to be a janitor and suddenly felt even colder. Only the people who were hiding deep in the crowd dared to curse a bit, but who dared to walk up even for one step? Suddenly, a warm wind came and dryness followed. The leaves that looked yellow on the tree sticking out of the wall suddenly withered. A red cloud fell down from the sky. Red Cloud Kylan descended soundlessly. It stepped on the green stone ground and the pondings near it instantly vaporized. A middle-aged man sat on the back of the Kylan wearing bloody armor. He looked very serious. Seeing this person, Jin Yulu stood up and placed the pot on the armrest of the bamboo chair to show respect. People saw him and guessed his identity. They all kneeled down to pay respect. The Yutian general of Great Zhou, Shuexing Chuan, owns a Red Cloud Kylan as his mount and uses a bloody knife. He ranked second among the 38 generals in the continent. He was deeply trusted by the Divine Queen and had been leading the Forbidden Soldiers for years. He had the right to rule over anything that happened in the capital and had the ability to do so. Seeing Shuexing Chuan's arrival, some felt very surprising. Even if people went to the police office to report, they couldn't have got there that fast. Moreover, how would the police office have the authority to send this big figure here? However, remembering that General Shuexing Chuan was known for being fair and just, people regained their hope. They shouted one after another, "The Tradition Academy just murdered people. Please hold the justice for us." After a while, a team of forbidden soldiers walked into the 100 Blossom Street to separate the people. They walked to the entrance of the Tradition Academy. In front of the stares of thousands of people, Shuexing Chuan slowly walked up the staircase to where Jin Yulu stood. At this moment, Chen Chongsheng and the other two people also arrived. Chapter 96, Fighting the Whole Capital, Part 3, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Senior, why bother with these little kids? Shuexing Chuan looked at Jin Yulu and said expressionlessly. His words surprised everyone. The entrance of Tradition Academy suddenly became silent. Everyone noticed that although Shuexing Chuan was expressionless and cold, He sincerely respected Jin Yulu and he didn't hesitate to show it. Anybody who knew Jin Yulu wouldn't find it awkward. Even Fei Dian, the oldest of the 38 generals of Zhou dynasty, was of no older generation than Jin Yulu. Even though Xue Chuan was one of the generals of Zhou dynasty, it was still suitable of him to address Jin Yulu as his senior. Since the youngsters in front of the Tradition Academy's entrance didn't know this, they were shocked. Jin Yulu smiled, someone wanted to barge in, I could only stop him. Xue Chuan turned around and looked at the young man who was covered in blood. He wrinkled his eyebrows and said, aren't you being a little too rough? Jin Yulu shook his head, I was a soldier and my responsibility was to guard my nation's territory. If the demon race dared to invade, my job was to push them back regardless of my actions and methods. Now, I am the door guard of Tradition Academy and I'm responsible for watching over this entrance. If anyone wants to barge into the Tradition Academy, I'll fight them back no matter the cost. Xue Chuan was silent. He knew the value of Jin Yulu's words. Just this moment, a young vice-general walked towards him and whispered something. Xue Chuan raised his eyebrows slightly and said, this thing is getting into a mess and it's not looking good for anyone. Jin Yulu pointed to the crowd in front of the entrance which was showing some signs of unrest and replied, what can we do? They have already been here for a while and are disturbing the peace. I'll leave the court out of this even though it should be here to put down the disturbance, but should we stop maintaining the peace of our property as well? Xue Chuan wrinkled his eyebrows even more. Tradition Academy went through a lot of messy events today but they were just meaningless riots, especially this one. If the government hadn't asked him to come out here to contain the situation, he wouldn't even be here. The young vice-general spoke, sir, we should just stand aside and watch. If anyone dare to violate the law of Zhou, then it wouldn't be late for us to punish them. Hearing this, Xue Chuan was satisfied. The suggestion from his vice-general was an appropriate action. He didn't hesitate. He walked towards a tavern in the 100 Blossom Street and was prepared to be a spectator of the situation. The Red Cloud Kailan looked around confused but it followed up. The rest of the army just lined up near the entrance of Tradition Academy. They showed that their intention was not to help any side, but that neither side should step outside of their lane either. Xue Chuan was satisfied with the current situation, but the two sides inside and outside of the entrance of Tradition Academy wasn't. The rioting crowd felt that since many people were already severely injured, it was unfair for Xue Chuan and his army to disregard the criminals who harmed them. Tang 36 felt that Xue Chuan had been unfair because the crowd was still in front of the academy and was still disturbing the peace. No matter which side the people were on, both felt that the decision was unfair and illogical. Xue Chuan felt that it was unfair for him to have to come here to solve this situation, so he stopped caring about fairness and logic. Since the forbidden soldiers were here, no one would dare to barge into the Tradition Academy again. The students of Tradition Academy would also stop hurting the crowd due to his presence. This was good enough for him to report back. There are only two places powerful enough for him to report to, the Royal Palace and Li Palace. But Xue Chuan never thought that although the three youngsters of Tradition Academy may care about his presence, they cared more about restoring peace to their home. Looking at the forbidden soldiers standing firmly in front of Tradition Academy, the rioting crowd realized that the government wouldn't interfere as long as they didn't rush into Traditional Academy. Some daring ones quickly started cursing again. Chen Changsheng could hear their words much more clearly at the entrance than at the library. Hearing their insults and accusations that the marriage vow was fake, Chen Changsheng's mood worsened. Tang 36's face got colder and his hand held the sword handle tighter than before. Are you deaf? Can't you all hear this nonsense? Tang 36 shouted at the young vice-general of the Forbidden Army. The young vice-general turned around and looked at him expressionlessly. We can hear it very clearly, why? Tang 36 said, if you can hear them cursing, why aren't you doing anything to stop them? The young vice General was silent for a moment as if he was giving the question some thought, then he answered, "Why should I stop them?" Tang 36's expression turned even colder. He replied, "Then if I say I want to sleep with your sister, is that fine too?" Hearing his words, the soldiers of Forbidden Army became furious. They glanced at him angrily. Since the general was resting at the tavern, if the vice-general commanded them, they would go up and teach the youngster a lesson. Strangely, the young vice-general wasn't angry. Instead, he asked seldomly, "You sure you want to do that?" Tang 36 thought back to his sister's violence of her younger days and calmed himself down forcefully, "I'm just joking, why so serious? You are not brave enough to do as you say, and now you aren't even cursing back when thousands of people are pointing at your nose. You are worthless." The young vice-general looked at him and mocked, "Go back to Wen Shui and cry in front of your grandfather." Tang 36 was furious after hearing this. He pointed at the vast crowd outside of the academy and said, "You must think I'm stupid enough to argue with 1,000 people just by myself." The young vice-general then said with a serious face, "Then there is nothing I can do. They have control of their own mouths and the sound is only heard in the academy. Who can do anything about this?" Chen Chongqing felt that there was something wrong with this conversation, so he walked to Tang 36 and whispered, "You know him. I'll explain after getting rid of these people." Tang 36 answered. People saw Chen Chongqing and thought he was similar to the rumor's description. His attire was ordinary while Tang 36's clothing was luxurious. Their discussion and whispers quickly got louder and they were determined that the person they saw was indeed the Chen Chongqing from the rumor. Suddenly, the yelling and cursing got louder as if it was about to reach the sky of the capital. Tang 36's face became gloomy and he made a small gesture with his left hand. The previously destroyed door of Tradition Academy was moved into the back. Mysteriously, Xian Yuanpe had left without anyone seeing him. He followed Tang 36's order. He followed along the wall of the academy and went a long way south. Then he used a ladder to flip over the wall to join the crowd in 100 Blossom Street. Although the crowd was big, no one could stop the strength of a Yao youngster. Just in a few moments, he pushed his way through and arrived 20 yards away from the entrance. Even so, no one noticed him because everyone was too caught up in the chaos. There was a stone in his hand. When he saw Tang 36's gesture, Xian Yuanpe knew that it was time to act. Even though he was a little nervous, when he saw Tang 36's cold stare, he knew that if he didn't do as he was told, then the Tradition Academy would face more trouble. Finally, he made his choice. He raised the stone in his hand and threw it at the entrance of Tradition Academy and yelled, "Kill this bastard." The cursing crowd was silent for a short moment. Everyone heard the words and saw the stone flying towards the entrance of Tradition Academy. They even saw the projectile path of the stone. Some people were about to cheer and some people became pale. Was this riot finally turning into a big mess? Bang! Followed by a loud crash, that stone crushed down heavily onto the stone stairs in front of the entrance of Tradition Academy. It shattered into pieces and bounced off the floor and landed squarely onto the ground. The stone was only a few inches away from Chen Chongqing's feet. Chen Chongqing was lucky enough so that the shattered pieces didn't hit him. Tang 36 praised Xian Yuanpe silently. The Yao race's control of strength was definitely a natural talent. Xian Yuanpe threw so accurately. Xian Yuanpe, who was standing in the crowd, was sweating and his heart was racing. He thought to himself, how come I used a little too much power? No matter what they thought, the stone had landed. The business in front of Tradition Academy had turned from a word fight into a physical battle. You guys dare use long-ranged weapon? Tang 36 yelled angrily as he picked up the stone on the ground and threw it at the crowd. The whoosh sound as the rock passed through the air was followed by a painful moan. A man held his forehead and fell backwards. Blood was flowing through the gap of his fingers. Tang 36's second stone quickly followed. Another man's teeth was knocked out and his mouth was filled with blood. The crowd outside of the academy finally realized what was happening and screamed for doctors. Some people yelled angrily and wanted to counter-attack, and some people rushed to the Forbidden Army and pointed at their bleeding companions. They wanted the army to capture the criminals. The field was filled with chaos. Finally, some people started fighting back. They picked up random items from the ground and threw them at the entrance of Tradition Academy. The field turned into a battleground, and the Forbidden Army standing in front of the wall of Tradition Academy couldn't do anything to stop either sides. Earlier, when the crowd was picking up stones, Tang 36 and Chen Chongsheng had left the entrance and climbed up the wall using a ladder. Tang 36 asked Chen Chongsheng to pass stones from the ground to him. There was a flower garden behind this wall, and a thin layer of rocks was beneath the garden. Their supply of rocks was limitless. But the situation outside the Tradition Academy was completely different. The 100 Blossom Street was always well cleaned, and it was hard to find rocks on the marble floor. What could the crowd do but shovel the marbles out of the ground? It may be faster for the crowd to go back home and get their knives from the kitchen. Some people looked at the broken entrance of Tradition Academy and noticed that there were many rock pieces and leftover wood fragments as well. They wanted to go and gather some ammunition, but Jin Yulu was still sitting on his chair. Who could walk past him? One side was well prepared while the other not. The winner of this fight would be decided quickly. Tang 36 occupied the top of the wall. Every time he threw a stone, one person would fall. Painful moans never stopped, and several dozens of people were injured by the stones. Just this morning, Tradition Academy's door was crushed by the carriage of Tian Hai family, and now the entire capital was cursing at the academy. Tang 36 endured long enough, and he finally found a chance to relieve that stress. He didn't hold back, and the stones flew off his hand to bring pain to the crowd. Some people stood in the back and thought he couldn't hit them. They widened their eyes and cursed loudly, but moments later, stones flew from the wall of Tradition Academy and hit them on the head. The crowd was immediately put down. What was Tang 36 thinking when he was enchanting the power of Qi onto the stones to throw them at people? So refreshing. He stood upon the wall and yelled while swinging his hand casually. Every stone that he threw hit someone. The young genius on the honor roll of Green Cloud was using Qi to fight against these rioting ordinary civilians. Was this not bullying? He had already entered the peak of meditation stage, and it could be said that he was one of the best Xiaoxianists of the younger generation. Even if he didn't use Qi intentionally, the stones threw from his hand made a large impact. How could the people in the street handle them? The cursing in front of Tradition Academy was replaced by painful moans. The loud insults already changed into cries. The crowd in front of Tradition Academy was already running away, trying to dodge Tang 36's attack. Blood was spilled on the ground and dust swirled in the air. In just a few moments, the enemy of Tradition Academy was eliminated. Too much, too much. The young vice-general of Forbidden Army saw the situation and finally had enough. He turned around and yelled at Tang 36, who was on the top of the wall. Speaking of which, Tang 36 knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't stand at any other places but right on the top of the wall that the Forbidden Army was standing in front of. Previously the crowd did gather some stones from the ground, but when they counter-attacked, at least half of them were afraid of hitting the army and didn't use much force. Tang 36 didn't stop throwing and asked, "What's too much?" The young vice-general said reluctantly, "You have already injured the crowd. Is this not too much? You previously said that they control their mouths and the voice can only be heard in the academy, so you couldn't do anything. Now if the stones are mine, the hands are mine, and the rocks are flying outside of the academy by accident. What's the difference between the two? Plus, they threw the first rock." After saying these words, Tang 36 glanced at the crowd and made sure Xian Yuanpa had already left. He was reassured, and he continued hitting the crowd with rocks. The street was filled with dust and cries. People helped each other and ran away. The situation was helpless and they looked like soldiers who had just lost in a battle. Although the crowd was scattered, Tang 36 was still not satisfied. He squinted and held a stone while focusing on the person in the back of the crowd. He remembered clearly that this person had said Chen Chongqing only relied on women. He couldn't let him run away with only a scraped head. Due to the marriage vow, the entire capital was showing their hatred toward Tradition Academy and Chen Chongqing. Tang 36 threw away the hatred and his stress threw the stones in his hand. Chen Chongqing didn't do much. He just kept on passing stones from the garden to Tang 36. If it was his usual self, he might have thought it was all a waste of time and life, but today, he was happy. He didn't even notice that his shirt was pierced by the thorns of the flower. He realized that there are many ways of life, or many ways of living life. Perhaps there are meaningless ways, but nevertheless interesting ways. Plus, it was easy to be happy this way. Chapter 97, Fall Rain Tradition Blood Case. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Suddenly, the young official jumped on the wall and blocked him from proceeding. He scolded in a low voice, "Enough. If you really kill someone, then it won't be good for anyone. Xian Yuanpe is big, did you really think no one would recognize him?" Tang 36 shrugged, threw the rock back into the garden near the wall and said, "Thanks, that if the young vice-general and the forbidden guards hadn't been here today, he still wouldn't have allowed the crowd to continue humiliating the Tradition Academy and Chen Chongqing. But no matter what, he wouldn't have been as happy as he was now and he didn't have to be concerned with the consequences." The young vice-general said expressionlessly, "You don't need to thank me. I only hope you remember what you said." Tang 36's expression changed slightly. He said, "I said many words today." The young vice-general patted his shoulder and said earnestly, "You mentioned my sister, and affronted my family. At least you should take some responsibility." Tang 36 said without hesitation, "I am concentrating solely on Xiu Xing now. So I decided to not consider marriage before 50. Hearing his words, the young vice-general's expression suddenly changed. He said angrily, "What the fuck, then how about my sister?" Tang 36 smiled apologetically, "I mean, isn't my grandma your grandma? This is improper, cousin." The entrance of the Tradition Academy was now completely empty, only rocks and some traces of blood remained. There were also some plum tree branches. This was probably because previously when Chen Chongqing was busy delivering rocks, he accidentally mixed in some plum tree branches with the rocks and delivered both of them. Chen Chongqing looked at the forbidden guards that were about to leave and said, "So that's why." Tang 36 sighed helplessly, "You don't understand, my cousin is scary." The cousin here refers to is his cousin's sister. Then, Xue Xing Chuan walked out of the restaurant and got on his Red Cloud Kailan to prepare to leave. From his expression, it could be seen that he felt satisfied with the result. As the general ranked second in the continent, Xue Xing Chuan ruled his soldiers strictly. How could he not know the background of his important subordinate, the young vice-general? He obviously knew the relationship between Tang 36 and him, but he still let the young vice-general handle the situation, so his attitude was very clear. As people left, the street became empty. Xian Yuanpe sneaked back too. After thanking Jin Yulu, the three young men walked back to the Tradition Academy. Chen Chongqing felt confused. He asked, "Why would General Xue help the Tradition Academy?" Tang 36 said, "In such short period of time, so many people gathered up to protest. Although one reason is because you are too good at drawing hate from others, there's definitely someone behind this." Chen Chongqing asked, "Who?" Tang 36 said, "Who else can it be? Even Xian Yuanpe knew. It was definitely the Tianhai family that attempted to destroy the Tradition Academy but failed to do so this morning." Chen Chongqing felt even more confused. He said, "General Xue is definitely one of the people whom the Divine Queen trusts the most, otherwise there's no way he would be allowed to rule the Forbidden Guards. I told you before. The Divine Queen and the Tian Hai family are not the same. Why? Simply speaking, she's married into the Qin family. Although her last name is Tian Hai, her son's last name is Chen. Her next generation will also have the last name of Chen. In the rumor, the Pope had spoken to the Divine Queen and said he have never heard of a case in which a nephew would visit his aunt's grave. It's a culture in China for one to visit one's parents' or grandparents' graveyard on particular holidays. But in the rumor, the Divine Queen doesn't have any of her own. Be quiet. Tang 36 looked directly to the front and said. There are some matters that you can't speak of. Chen Chongqing thought a bit. No longer wanting to continue talking about this issue, he just said, thanks. He was giving thanks for how Tang 36 defended him earlier. Tang 36 said, nope. Besides the few people in the Tradition Academy, and the Yao who leaned towards them due to Luo Luo, no one in the continent wanted to see Suyu Rong marrying Qin Chongsheng. Many high officials also expressed their worries and their objections to this. Their opinions didn't contain any degree of resentment and envy, they were simply concerned for the general situation of the human race. They talked about fighting against the demons and making a union between the South and North. From the primary emperor to the current Divine Queen, the union between the South and the North, the true agreement among humans, had always been the most important policy of the Great Zhou. At the court conference today, because of the expected marriage between Qin Chongsheng and Suyu Rong, the officials argued feverishly. The officials who leaned towards the old royal family liked to see such a thing happen, but against the officials who cited the righteous cause, they were losing ground. Ultimately, the court conference reached one conclusion: the marriage would need to be discussed in greater depth until it actually becomes a reality. Of course, their opinions were not important because marriage was a private thing. No matter how much power these high officials held, they still couldn't actively intervene. They could only express their attitudes. As long as the Pope's print was still on the engagement document, and the Divine Queen didn't say a word about it, no one could negate this marriage. Immediately, news of the bloody event that happened at the entrance of the Tradition Academy quickly spread over the capital. Some professors furiously hit their desks and stood up immediately after hearing this. Some high officials harshly criticized Xuexing Chuan for not regulating this thing fairly, and some citizens even started a march to express their anger. They gathered in front of the Department of the Traditional Education to ask the bishop to suspend Qin Chongsheng, and to kick him out of the capital. Suddenly, everyone's eyes were focused on the Department of Traditional Education. People all wanted to know how the bishop, who seemed to never sleep enough, would solve the complicated situation given the Divine Queen and the Pope's ambiguous intentions. Surprisingly, the bishop did not concern himself with the Divine Queen's and the Pope's attitudes at all. Unlike how people imagined that he would procrastinate, he instead used the most simple and direct method, dispelling the people in front of the department. The bishop ordered the guards of the tradition to ride their horses straight into the crowd. Dust went all over the place. Some people cried and countless bones were broken. The crowd dispersed. It was just like the scene that happened in front of the Tradition Academy, except this was more bloody and more terrifying. Everyone felt shocked and speechless to what had happened in front of the Department of the Traditional Education. It wasn't until now that they realized that the bishop was actually so tough. The fact that he deployed so many guards of the tradition without consulting with the Pope had some people thinking that the bishop was far stronger than they had imagined him to be. According to statistics, from the two events that happened in the Tradition Academy in the Department of Traditional Education, 3 people died, more than 300 people were injured, and more than 70 people were heavily wounded. Compared to the number of casualties, the actual scene was more bloody and violent. Its impact would be immense. On that day, there was a fall rain. This case would be recorded as the fall rain tradition blood case. In the back of this fall rain tradition blood case, many people saw the trace of the Tian Hai family. There was a quiet manor in the west city of the capital, the base of the Tian Hai family. A middle-aged man, sitting on the bamboo chair next to the trees, looked in the direction of the Department of Traditional Education and said, "Look, some elders finally couldn't wait to act." Standing next to him, Ze Ji frowned slightly. No one knew what he was thinking. Chapter 98, Listen to the Queen. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The middle-aged man's name is Tian Hai Ching-wu. He became the head of the Tian Hai family 20 years ago after his father, Tian Hai Yugua, passed away. Under his lead, the family of Tian Hai grew prosperous and powerful. Sometimes people would even forget that he was the nephew of the divine queen. It's high praise for him to achieve such a thing under the ruling of the divine queen. The old generation is powerful. Even I dare not disturb them. Xing Shui's actions were too naive. You are his uncle, but you didn't do anything to stop him. Did you want to see how much blood would bleed out of the capital? Ze Ji walked towards the chair in front of him and sat down. He glanced over the wall expressionlessly and said, "The bishop will compensate for these lives. Xue Xingchuan controls the forbidden army of Zhou dynasty. As a trusted subordinate of Divine Queen, he became responsible for the safety of the capital after he was switched in from the front line. It would be impossible to gather so much people in front of the Department of Education without his consent." What compensation? Are you saying that he will be kicked out of the Department of Education? You all are fools. If the relationship between the bishop and the pope worsen, the bishop position will become stronger. Why? Because only the bishop can compete with the pope in terms of history. Therefore my aunt needs him. Tian Hai Ching-wu said, "Whoever my aunt favors, he or she will be famous, such as Su Yu Rong and Mou. Whoever my aunt trusts, they will be prosperous like you and Xue Xingchuan. But none of them compare to need. Because needing is unique, it represents a mutual relationship. Don't ever try to aggravate that sleeping fox in the Department of Education again." He stared at Ze Ji and said, "I watched Mei Li Sha for several dozen years, and I still can't figure him out. How could a young man like Xing Shui be his opponent?" Ze Ji was silent for a moment. Then he said, "So we shouldn't do anything." Tian Hai Ching-wu knew what Ze Ji was worrying about. He glanced at Ze Ji and said, "The marriage vow is already known to the world. These little tricks will be useless after you use them too frequently. Furthermore, they will only make matters worse because if the situation gets messy, it will be hard to clean up afterwards." Ze Ji wrinkled his eyebrows slightly and remained silent. "I still don't understand. It's been months since that youngster arrived at the capital. Why didn't you kill him from the beginning? Why did you wait until the Ivy Festival where he took out the marriage vow? This isn't your style of doing business." Tian Hai Ching-wu looked at him and said irritatedly. Ze Ji hardly ever saw such emotion from Tian Hai Ching-wu's face. He knew that he was angry. The Tian Hai family always had a good relationship with the Southerners. It may seem as if the family was trying to follow Zhou dynasty's policy of bounding the north and south, but any wise person knew what the head of Tian Hai family really wanted: the support of the Southerners. This would be a key factor too when he tries to ascend the throne for emperor in the future. From this point of view, regardless of the business of the dynasty, the family, or the throne, the marriage between Dongyu General's mansion and Qiu Shan family would be an important component. But now, the component is in a mess, and that mess was supposed to be cleaned up by Ze Ji long ago. Yu Rong sent a letter that said that she didn't want to harm him. Ze Ji said after a moment of silence. Tian Hai Ching-wu slapped the handle of the bamboo chair and said irritatedly, "She's your daughter." Ze Ji's expression was bitter. She also sent a letter to Mou. I'm not exactly sure if the queen read it or not. The bamboo forest was quiet. After a long time, Tian Hai Ching-wu sighed deeply. Everyone thinks the Tian Hai family was just using your heir as an excuse, but not many realize that I actually wanted to rip Qin Changsheng into pieces. True, yet heir is of the outer 6 sections. He's pretty far from the elder sect, but that kid really has some potential that he entered the upper stage of meditation at such a young age. You should understand what this means. If he was ranked in the honor roll of Green Cloud, he could easily rank in the top 20. The capital never knew the true strength of Tian Ji. Only until the first night of Ivy Festival did the public see his power. But seeing is different from the admittance of the head of Tian Ji family. Su Shiji's expression turned serious. A gloomy flame was burning in Tian Ji Chengwu's eyes. In terms of Shixing potential, he's better than Xing Shui. Heck, he's much better than the three siblings of Xing Shui. He entered the upper stage of meditation at such a young age, and if everything goes smoothly, he can reach the doorknob of Heartseek. If he enters the Heartseek stage successfully, then he will be younger than Qiu Shanjun when he entered Heartseek. But now he's handicapped. Su Shiji's expression was solemn. What are you trying to say? I want Qin Chongxing dead. Tian Ji Chengwu looked at him with a faint smile. No one can touch Princess Luo Luo, and it will be difficult to harm Qin Chongxing at the moment. But you are different, you are his future father. Law. You have more access in terms of doing things to him. Hearing this, Su Shiji's expression turned ugly. After the Ivy Festival, he became a joke of the capital. Everyone thought he liked the rich and despised the poor. Although the truth may not be this simple, it's similar to the fact that the marriage was a slap to the face. As long as the Tradition Academy exists in the capital and Qin Chongxing lives in this world, this shame will follow him every day. He has no good feelings about Qin Chongxing, or in fact he's the person who wants Qin Chongxing dead the most. However, at the same time, he's also the person who can't do anything about it. Countless people are watching Dongyu General's mansion and they want to see how he will react. The elders in the tradition are especially waiting for him to make a move. If he actually dares to touch Qin Chongxing, another big storm will arise, and this storm can even drag the Divine Queen in. Su Shiji would never put himself in such a situation. He stared into the eyes of Tian Ji Chengwu and wanted to see what the bold and powerful head of Tian Ji family really thought. In the past, it would be easy to kill him. But now? Not anymore. Does the general not want to help the family of Tian Ji? Tian Ji Chengwu stood up and looked at him expressionlessly. Su Shiji knew what he meant. He was silent for a moment and replied, "Sir, I'm the general of the Divine Queen." After finishing his sentence, he turned around and walked out of the garden. Tian Ji Chengwu looked at his back and said, "Is that right? Then what did you talk about when you met Prince Qianlu last time?" Su Shiji didn't stop for a moment as if he didn't hear the words. Following the morning rain, Tian Ji Xingshui arrived at the entrance of Tradition Academy and broke through the door. Qin Chongsheng and his crew stopped him and Jin Yulu stepped into the situation. They forced Tian Ji Xingshui to leave without victory. Then the public rioted against the Tradition Academy. Now, battle horses are screaming in front of the Department of Education while the citizens are bleeding. In such a short period of time, the old and new forces of Zhou dynasty are colliding with each other because of Tradition Academy and Qin Chongsheng. Although the collision isn't necessarily brutal and devastating, the momentum is forceful and sharp. The atmosphere of the capital tightened and many people are starting to recall the events that happened dozens of years ago. Luckily the impact and level of collision are under strict control. The new and old forces are still calm because the Divine Queen and Pope have yet to say anything. The entire capital is under pressure while the Tradition Academy's involvement in the matter grows. The fate of the Academy and Qin Chongsheng and whether or not the marriage vow will be nullified by the powerful figures depend on the Divine Queen and the Pope's decisions toward the entire situation. The former emperor was in power for 400 years. He was constantly sick and enjoyed pursuing his hobbies rather than tackling governmental issues. That was why the queen started helping the emperor with the dynasty's business. If we count precisely, she has already been in control for 200 years. The entire court is under her control and many officials and generals are under her ruling. Or else how would she have become the divine queen after the former emperor passed away? Regardless of the rage and opposition of the emperor's family and government officials, they still obeyed her after the massacre. Tang 36 said to Qin Changshan. The divine queen is outstanding. How outstanding? I don't know. The only thing I know is that a wild and rebellious man like my grandfather stayed in Wen Shui for so many years and insulted the people of Tian Hai family as if they were dog shit. However, whether he was in the public or private, living room or hidden space, he dare not speak a word against the divine queen, he added. He continued, the entirety of Zhou dynasty will follow the attitude of divine queen. Although she's still in her prime now, she needs to think about the future. Who will become the next emperor of Zhou dynasty? The queen can oppress the court officials with her boundless reputation, and even the pope is keeping his silence. But if the throne isn't returned to the hands of the royal Qin family, then even the best of the Tian Hai family, Tian Hai Chengwu, or the most experienced, Tian Hai Chengwen, doesn't have the ability to oppress their opposition. But if she does return the throne back to royal Qin family, after she dies, the family of Tian Hai will be cleaned up. At last, her last name is Tian Hai, how would she want to see such a thing happen? Therefore the queen is also hesitating now. The clashes between the new and old forces are due to the hesitation of the queen. They saw their chance, but they also saw the danger that came along with it. Unfortunately, the Tradition Academy became a symbol for the collisions. The Pope brought Luo Luo back to Academy of Li Palace, which means he is showing hints of his attitude. Now, if Divine Queen also holds the same attitude, then the Tradition Academy is in great danger. Forget Princess Luo Luo, if the Divine Queen really wants to kill someone, even the White Emperor can't do anything. Tang 36 looked at Qin Changsheng and finished, if I were you, the first thing I do now is to find ways to locate the Divine Queen. Then I would kneel before her, wrap my arms around her legs and cry. Finally, I will request her to judge this situation fairly. Qin Changsheng thought about it for a long time and then he said, so, how can I find her? Tang 36 was quiet for a while, then he yelled irritatingly out of the window, is dinner still not done? Chapter 99, The Way of Shoshing is Greater Than Life and Death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xian Yuanpe walked in with a plate of food on his head. Since the people in the herb garden were gone, no one sent in the meals anymore. The Tradition Academy had to cook meals themselves, and unfortunately, the Yao youngster was responsible for cooking in the first few days. The starlight shone through the windows of the library. It was as bright as the meals were tasteless. During lunch, Jin Yulu had tried Xian Yuanpe's dishes and told them that they didn't need to wait for him to start the meal. Tang 36 put down his chopsticks, looked at Xian Yuanpe and asked sincerely, did you forget to add salt again? Qin Changsheng looked at him and laughed, just as you say often, you switched the topic too suddenly. Tang 36 didn't change his expression. He defended, that's because your question was too ridiculous. After finishing the tasteless dinner, the three people started walking around the Lake of Tradition Academy. Faintly, they could see the candlelight from the newly built house. They could also smell the tasty roast chicken and liquor from the opening of the door. Sensing the smell, Tang 36 was jealous of Jin Yulu's dinner. He suggested to buy takeout starting tomorrow because both he and Qin Changsheng had money. No matter how much Xian Yuanpe could eat, their pockets wouldn't be bothered. Xian Yuanpe wanted to accept the suggestion, but Qin Changsheng objected. He argued that the food from takeouts were full of oil and salt, which wasn't good for their health. Although Xian Yuanpe's food was tasteless, its ingredients were healthy. Tang 36 and Xian Yuanpe were used to Qin Changsheng's strict and disciplined lifestyle. Besides shaking their heads, they didn't bother arguing with him. The three continued walking around the lake until the night darkened and stars illuminated the surface of the lake. A tree's branches reached all the way to the lake. It was shaking from the wind and it seemed like the branches were trying to pick up the reflections of the stars. Chen Chongsheng saw this scene and started thinking about Luo Luo. Although they have only been separated for 2 days, he was missing her already. Is she happy in the Academy of Palace Li? Who's teaching her to Xiuxing? Did she break the barrier in her Zhui air vein? Is she thinking about this lake and the tree growing beside it? Tang 36 and Xian Yuanpa thought about Luo Luo when they smelled the food from the small house. Without Luo Luo, there was no one at the herb garden, no tasty food, and no pretty girl. It was sad that they couldn't see the princess and that the troubles they were facing were so complicated. When are you coming back? Come back quickly, your master can't hold it anymore, Chen Chongsheng wondered to himself. After they were finished walking, Tang 36 was ready to walk around the streets. But he saw Chen Chongsheng entering the library to Xiuxing and Xian Yuanpa testing his strength on the trees around the lake. He felt embarrassed. He thought for a moment, walked next to Chen Chongsheng and sat down. He closed his eyes and slowed his breathing. His 2 hands rested casually on his knees and his palms faced the night sky. Tang 36 started to meditate and Xiuxing as well. After a while, he opened his eyes and felt the flow of qi in his veins. He used his mind as his eyes and he carefully observed the situation in his body. This was the inner sense of meditation stage. As the inner sense continued, a thin layer of light shined from his pupils. Since the process of inner sensing could be detected from his outer form, it meant that he have achieved the peak of meditation stage. A Xiaoxingist who reached the peak of meditation stage at 16 years old will be the focus of any faction or sect, whether it's the Heavenly Academy or the Mountain Li's Sword sect. But now, he was just Xiaoxinging by himself at the Tradition Academy. Tang 36 didn't regret his decision, but without a teacher guiding him, the process of Xiuxing will slow down and it will influence his confidence in breaking the barrier of Xiuxing. Just this moment, Chen Chongsheng opened his eyes. Tang 36 looked at him and thought, since you taught Princess Luo Luo, why would it bother me to ask for your mentorship? As he was thinking, he asked several questions of Xiuxing that bothered him for a while. Chen Chongsheng thought seriously for a long time and said, that I don't understand. Tang 36 was irritated, you can solve such difficult problems like helping people of Yao race control their path of qi. If it weren't for Luo Luo and Officer Jin, I bet the White Emperor would have already ordered people to capture you and have you sent back to the Red River. Now you are saying you don't understand my question. Yao's body structure is special and in Princess Luo Luo's case, even more so. Due to her uniqueness, I was able to think of some solutions. Because I had already spent years researching the functions of one's veins. But your question is about the inner sense of meditation. I have yet to reach that stage, how am I to help you? Chen Chongsheng looked at him and said, to be honest, I don't think you have to worry too much. You have already entered the peak of meditation at such a young age, and the barrier of heart-seek is only inches away from you. You just need to Xiuxing at your own pace and one day, you will break the limit. It's best for you to not disturb your flow. It's not about the great trial. Tang 36 saw his eyes and knew he misunderstood. He stood up and walked to the window and glanced at the countless stars in the night sky. Tang 36 was silent for a moment and said, Xiuxing is like rowing a boat in an opposite stream. It will get harder and harder as you progress. Although I have already entered the peak of meditation stage and my achievement may seem outstanding. That barrier is hard to cross. Chen Chongsheng was silent. When he was in the old temple of Xining village, he knew nothing about Xiuxing. Now that he had already studied for half a year in Tradition Academy, he knew what Tang 36 wanted to say. But since he was yet to enter purification, his distance to that barrier was still vast. Therefore, he never really thought about it. It will be harder and harder to progress in the path of Xiuxing, and it will get even more dangerous. From the inner sense of meditation to the heart-seek stage was the first mountain that Xiaoxingists needed to climb. From that point onwards, Xiaoxingists climb an ever-sloping mountain. However, most people fail at the first mountain because the Xiaoxingists at that time are inexperienced. Countless years ago, the scroll of the way appeared in the world and people's wisdom expanded. Humans began to Xiuxing, and in countless years, countless geniuses appeared. Some of them were able to reach purification and meditation stage when they were youngsters, but they failed in front of the heart-seek barrier. They paid with their lives. Those geniuses were just like Tang 36, their names were on the honor roll of Green Cloud and they were recognized by the world. But if they didn't cross that barrier and died, within a short time, their names would be forgotten by the people in this continent and their spot would be filled by new youngsters. Why are Qiu Shanjun, Suyu Rong, Go Han Shi and even earlier, Mou, Tian Hai Xing Shui treated as true geniuses and are treated specially by the elder generation? Because they were able to cross the barrier of heart-seek when they were very young. These people were able to cross the most difficult stage. Although they could still fall during the path of Xiuxing and their souls could vanish, the possibility of them becoming truly powerful Xiaoxiangists was more probable than anyone else's. Tang 36 didn't want to die, neither did he want to be forgotten. In order to enter meditation stage and claim victory at next year's great trial, in order to rank up in the honor roll of Green Cloud, he left his hometown to go to the capital and study at the Heavenly Academy. Only truly prestigious factions and academies like the Heavenly Academy and Mountain Lee's Sword Sect could provide their students with the best resources to increase their chance of breaking the barrier. Now, he left Heavenly Academy and switched to the Tradition Academy, a school with only students and no teachers. Who could help him? Although Officer Jin is powerful, his path of Xiuxing is of the Yao's method. He can't help Tang 36. Chen Chongsheng was silent for a long time and said, "If you trust me, then perhaps, I can try to find ways to help you." Tang 36 forced a smile and laughed, "Are you trying to experiment on me? Are you not willing to do so?" Chen Chongsheng laughed and asked. Tang 36 said, "I'm very daring." Chen Chongsheng said, "I think you are just very confident in me." Tang 36 was wordless. "If I remember correctly, you have still yet to reach purification." He didn't need to remember anything, he just needed to see. Chen Chongsheng's hands and hair were no different from any ordinary person, in fact, he couldn't be any more ordinary. If a dull knife slashed lightly on his wrist, a thin red line would definitely appear and he would bleed out a few moments later. I don't understand either. For half a year, he meditated every night to absorb the starlight for the use of purification. Every step was precise and correct but nothing was gained. Even a person as determined as he was would eventually get tired of it. He stared at the stars outside of the window and shook his head, "Maybe it's just my talent." After hearing him describe all the details of absorbing the starlight to purify, Tang 36 reached out his hand and grabbed Chen Chongsheng's wrist. He closed his eyes and carefully detected the situation in his body and noticed that there was no star energy in his body. He was confused as well. He was always convinced that Chen Chongsheng was a true genius and his belief grew stronger after learning of the marriage vow between Chen Chongsheng and Suyu Rong. But he could never understand how a genius would have a problem in the path of Xiuxing. How could he not be able to reach purification? "Perhaps, there's problem with your veins." A voice was heard near the door of the library. Jin Yulu walked in and looked at Chen Chongsheng. "Even when we Yao Xiuxing, we need to bathe in starlight. But since our vein structure is different from that of humans, our methods are different. I don't know if it's the same situation with you." Chen Chongsheng was silent for a bit. Then he spoke, "Yes, there are some problems with my vein structure." Tang 36 was confused. He asked, "But earlier you said it's talent. Vein structure is determined when you are born. Naturally, it's a type of talent." Chen Chongsheng didn't explain all the details because that would reveal his biggest secret. If Tang 36 kept asking, he wouldn't know how to answer. That shadow would give too much pressure and he knew clearly that he didn't want any other person to endure such a burden. Jin Yulu looked at him quietly and spoke suddenly, "The heaven is truly never fair." Biov, yes, the way of heaven is always fair but never fair. One phrase says it all, it harms the abundant and supplies the limited.